Video games are hard.
Leave me the f*** alone! Leave me alone! Leave me alone!
Not all of them, but some are kind of a son of a bitch, and I kinda like that. The more challenging, the better. And with a name like the Metroidvania Guru, you can imagine the delight I get when I stumble across a Metroidvania that kicks my ass. But some of these Metroidvanias, they might need to pump the brakes a little bit. Or at least give us a safe word.
So, are the girls coming back?
Because I can only take so much punishment before frustration sets in and the cursing begins. Regardless of whether the MV's difficulty comes from the intense boss battles, labyrinthine levels, obscure puzzles, or just straight up poor balancing, bad controls, or terrible design, I always come back for more, like the Stockholm Syndrome victim I am. Hey, I'm the Metroidvania Guru, and this is the top 10 hardest Metroidvanias.
Number 10.
Samus's first adventure is not great. Maybe by 80s standards, but is that really a standard? Don't get me wrong, I love me some Metroid on the NES, but it is so hard to go back to nearly 40 years later. There's no in-game map, nearly every room looks exactly the same, enemies hit you way too hard, and while transitioning between rooms, which is complete bullshit, and finding secrets or even the normal path of progression just to complete the game, yeah, have fun bombing every little pixel.
Number 9.
Souldiers is not my favorite Metroidvania. It's not even close. It's too long, the pyramid biome is atrocious and overstays its welcome, and besides its absolutely gorgeous visuals, it really doesn't do a whole lot to stick out from the rest of the MV scene, except for being the most punishingly difficult game you could ever play. But only when it was first released. At launch, Souldiers was an unforgiving and unbalanced nightmare. You can verify this yourself simply by reading early reviews on Steam. Thankfully, the devs released a balancing patch that eased the game up a ton, so it's not nearly as unplayable.
Number 8.
An Untitled Story might be a little obscure, but its developer sure isn't. You might know them from their other works. Little indie titles called Towerfall and Celeste, and, as one might rightfully presume from the sadist who brought us Celeste, An Untitled Story comes with some real challenging and tricky platforming. Though, none of An Untitled Story's platforming is as punishing as Celeste's, because if it was, it'd be at the top of the list, baby! If you haven't played this little gem, you should. It's a bit crude and rough around the edges, but the heart and spirit of what makes MVs great permeates throughout every aspect of An Untitled Story. Just don't play it with a keyboard. Ooh, I fucking hate this game!
Number 7.
ESA is a legend among Metroidvania enthusiasts. It's beloved for its low-res graphical style, fun and engaging MV exploration, and all of its juicy, juicy secrets just waiting to be discovered. No, I'm not gonna spoil this amazing game's secrets. I'm just here to tell you that it's f***ing hard as f***. There's no healing in ESA outside of save stations, and the constantly respawning enemies are going to make you lament that design choice very quickly. And of course, the bosses can be very punishing, and some of the late game and optional platforming sections will have you pulling your hair out. And let's say you're clever enough to discover the game's hidden layers. Now, you're working on a whole other level of hard, with the game pushing your gray matter and gaming chops. Good luck with that, dorks.
Number 6.
I'm gonna say it. Sultan Sanctuary is the Dark Souls of Metroidvanias. I'm not even being metaphorical. This is literal. Sultan Sanctuary is 2D Dark Souls. Ska Studios ripped From Software off wholesale and just threw one of the dimensions into the trash. And I'm so glad they did, because Sultan Sanctuary is so freaking good. And so freaking hard. Enemies are ruthless, traps are everywhere, including pits that take full advantage of fall damage. And the bosses? Boys, let me tell you, this game has all the bosses. You'll be facing off against so many bosses, and each one will stop you dead in your tracks. And like any Souls-like, you'll be able to enjoy all the corpse running and boss run backs to your heart's content. Hooray.
Number 5.
If Sultan Sanctuary is the Dark Souls of Metroidvanias, then it's pretty obvious where Nine Souls falls on the From Software spectrum. Parrying's the name of the game in Nine Souls, so quick reaction speeds and pattern recognition are an absolute must if you plan on not getting smacked around in this game. Regular enemies and bosses are pretty relentless, but the reward for finally mastering encounters is second to none. And I don't mean just in the MV space, in all of gaming. Being able to negate every single attack a boss throws at you is a satisfaction I can't aptly put into words. And with mechanics like internal bleeding, where imperfect parries cause slight damage that recovers over time, the game's pretty forgiving, unlike the next game on this list.
Number 4.
GRIME doesn't care about you. You either nail the parry perfectly or get nailed by enemy attacks. There's no in between. And the bosses in this game, they don't care about you either. They're so hard, it's not uncommon to fight them a dozen times before you finally beat them. And that's a conservative number. I'm pretty sure it took me like an hour to finally take down the shapely fetus. Not only is the combat intense, but some of these platforming sections can really get out of hand. If you're not bringing your A game to both combat and platforming, GRIME is gonna eat you alive, which is the worst way to be eaten, probably.
Number 3.
Is this really the first time I've actually talked about Rabi-Ribi on my channel? I've been memeing on this game for over a year, and I finally talk about it in a top 10 hardest Metroidvanias list. Better late than never, I guess. So, you might be asking yourself, how hard can a horny Yuri game about a bunny girl really be? Oh, my sweet summer child. Allow me to elucidate. Don't let the cute chibi characters, bright environments, and upbeat music fool you. Rabi-Ribi's bullet hell boss fights are an absolute nightmare. Imagine the most ridiculous bullet hell sequence you've ever seen. Now, add gravity. Sound absurd? That's because it is. Rabi-Ribi is absurd. Most people will skip Rabi-Ribi because of its risque visuals, and others will drop it because of its extreme difficulty. We call these people weak.
Number 2.
Aeterna Noctis is what happens when Hollow Knight and Celeste have a baby, and then they train that baby to hate you. Aeterna Noctis was so hard at launch that the devs eventually patched it up with an easier difficulty. And for that, I am eternally grateful, because had they not provided an easier option, I would have noped the hell out of this game. But to be perfectly honest, even though there's an easier difficulty, it's still pretty dang hard. If you haven't played Aeterna Noctis, just imagine Kaizo Mario or I Want to Be the Guy, but like fair. Because despite what my therapist keeps telling me, Aeterna Noctis isn't trying to get anyone. There's no bullshit here. Just a whole lot of spikes and fire you're meant to navigate through. And let me tell you, navigating through all this is only half the battle. The other half is actually battling. The boss fights in this game are suitably epic and will destroy you if you're not up to snuff. And if Aeterna Noctis' insane platforming challenges and insane bosses aren't enough to take you out, then its insanely long playtime just might.
Number 1.
La-Mulana isn't just hard, it's cruel. Typically, I can add some caveat like, this game's hard but fair, but I can't with La-Mulana, because this game is not fair, and it revels in the fact that it's not fair. This game wants you dead. It doesn't administer tough love in an attempt to teach you valuable life lessons in the hopes that you'll one day succeed. It wants you 6 feet under the ground so it can laugh at your funeral and piss on your grave. This game hates you. It hates your family, it hates your friends, it hates your dog and or cat. In all seriousness, La-Mulana asks a lot of players. You think you can just come into La-Mulana without a physical notebook and pen to write shit down? Don't be ridiculous. What, you thought you could navigate this absurdly large map with controls and jumping physics that weren't completely rigid and frustrating? Get out of here. Seriously, you thought you wouldn't have to remember a dozen concurrent puzzles and struggle to remember where everything is in this open world? Now who sounds like an idiot? Hope you like backtracking, moron. Oh, and the bosses? Yeah, they're all hard too, naturally. And all this ridiculousness is why La-Mulana is the hardest Metroidvania you could ever play.